Now, Paul Melly is an Associate Fellow of the Africa Programme at Chatham House, and he joins us live from London. Thanks so much for joining us, Paul. Now, we've just heard there that the first round was marred by a lot of security concerns and accusations of ballot stuffing. So what's going to be different this second time around for voters?
Well, I think in the first round, the election was more or less plausible. There were a lot of international observers, and they didn't feel the need to actually disown the vote or seriously condemn it. But there were, as you mentioned, some important failings and irregularities. There were complaints about ballot stuffing, which it hasn't been possible to verify up to now, but certainly could be serious because most of the complaints brought by the opposition to the Constitutional Court were rejected not because they had no grounds, but because they were submitted too late. So we don't really know the truth about those failings in the first round. We also had more than 700 polling stations where people couldn't vote because of security problems, particularly in central Mali, where there's been a long-running conflict for the last couple of years, mixing jihadist violence with a conflict between people who live from pastoralism, from animal herding, and people who are farmers. And the security situation in the centre of the country remains very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Now, Paul, you just mentioned there the conflicts and the security situation. Now, for those that don't follow Mali very closely, tell us what will be the key issues for whoever wins this election. And for this, well, it's likely to be Ibrahim Boubacar Keita. Obviously, he's in pole position. So what will be the main issues for whoever wins to address?
Well, the first thing is to really complete the peace process. Several years ago, back in 2011, 2012, there was a huge crisis in the north of the country, which was taken over for about 9 months by jihadists until French and West African troops intervened to end that occupation. And following that, there was a peace agreement. But in the center of the country, these new security problems have cropped up, and they aren't really covered by that peace accord that's in place already. So the first challenge facing Keita or Cissé, whoever wins, will be to really tackle the security crisis in the center of the country and develop a local peace initiative with local communities that can actually restore stability, because that's a much more densely populated area than the north. And then there's also expectations for better public services, more development, the normal bread and butter basic issues of life in West Africa: water, roads, schools, healthcare, that sort of thing. And Keita's record has been, should we say, unimpressive on that. Not disastrous, but he hasn't really driven things forward. So it's really a case of injecting new momentum and dynamism into the leadership of the government. That's what's needed.
Mm-hmm. And it's likely, as we're seeing, that it will be Ibrahim Boubacar Keita who could possibly inject that momentum. How popular is he? Tell us more about him.
Well, he was elected, first of all, back in 2013, in the aftermath of the previous crisis, on a wave of sort of nationalistic positive feeling, because he campaigned for restoring Mali's pride. And the weakness is that he didn't really back up that proposition with policy detail. And that election, again, pitted him in the runoff against Cissé. Cissé was too technocratic and didn't really capture the mood of the country, even though he had lots of policy proposals. So what Keita, if he's re-elected, as seems likely, needs to do is somehow pick up some of the practical policy needs that have been put forward by the opposition, because he's lost a lot of popularity, particularly in Bamako, among younger people, for example, who feel he hasn't tackled unemployment, he hasn't really moved development forward. His image has been tarnished by corruption scandals in the government, for example, over a huge scandal over importing fertilizer, which was then watered down, so it wasn't much use for the farmers. That's where he's really disappointed. There isn't the same sense of great popularity behind him now that there was 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And yet Cissé hasn't really managed to capitalize on that and capture the imagination of the Malian public either. So there are quite a lot of votes. When you think that Keita got around 40%, in the first round, but 60% of Malians voted for the opposition. They spread their votes pretty widely.
Okay.
Cissé didn't dominate the opposition vote. That shows that there's a general lack of faith, if you like, among many of the political proposals and the leaders on offer at the moment.
Paul, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for that insight into Mali. That was Paul Melly, an Associate Fellow of the African Programme at Chatham House in London.